take the piece.
Yeah.
Queen F2.
Oh yeah, it's Queen of 2 played it.
Oh!
Arivindh. What a result.
What a win! Arvind
What a win.
beats the world number 2, Arjun. Sarah, what's your feeling like? Come on!
So there you have it. That was wow, what a game from round 6. Arivindh versus Arjun. I wish I could have got to it yesterday, but you know, I got busy, and but now today we're gonna look at this game in detail. And first, I want to say please hit that thumbs up button. What you saw were, of course, the last moments of that game and the resignation that took place. And now we are going to look at this fantastic game that started off, surprisingly enough, as a Trompowsky attack. So shout out to the British Grandmaster Julian Hodgson,
Soft corner for Arvind.
Yeah.
You know,
who popularized
today he has reached
the
2700, which in my opinion he should have reached about 5
back
years
in the
ago.
90s.
You know, no? According to Ramesh, among all his
lot of
students, the
Grandmaster
most
scouts with
talented
that.
was Arvind Chinnammai.
Yeah,
that
and this
open.
includes Prague also.
Prague also. So I'm not at all surprised that whatever he has come to, it has come late. So the ability was always there. Only that this tournament strategy, it didn't look.
All right, so let's get into the game. Listen, Arjun couldn't keep winning forever, right? So Arivindh had the white pieces, Arjun the black pieces. Let's look at it. So D4, knight of 6, bishop G5. This is Trompowsky. D5, E3, G6, and now the game is going to transpose into a Torre attack. Knight of 3, castle, bishop E2, C5, C3. This is one of those type of systems you play when you just want to get a game. It's a cousin to the Carly system, Trompowsky. These are types of openings nowadays. You're just trying to avoid a lot of opening preparation theory. You're just trying to get a game without being lost and out of the opening. And, you know, you seek to outplay your opponent with equal chances for each side. B6, castle, bishop B7. So here it's absolutely equal. B4, the standard Torre attack move. Moves like H3, bishop F4 could be played here also. Knight BD7, white resolves the tension. B takes C5, B takes C5, and now Queen B3, just highlighting that weak bishop there on B7. Other option, Rook B1 can be played. Also Queen A4, but Queen B3 was played. Queen C8, and now A4. Another good move here is Rook A B1. Again, putting the question to that bishop on B7. And play could continue bishop A6, for example, attacking the bishop on E2, and just trading off those bishops. Queen takes A6, Queen B7, setting up, you know, sort of a trappy situation. If Queen takes A2, then just Rook A B1, Queen C2, take that knight, and then play Rook FC1. So Queen E6, Bishop F4, H3, and you just have a playable game here. White takes over the only open file. And this is what a sample line looks like. So back to the game. A4 was played, expanding over there on the queen side. H6. And now Rook A B1. All right, so black has to make a decision. Does he preserve his bishop on b7 and just trade it for the bishop on g5 or not? So he plays the move bishop c6. Bishop a6 is also playable, transposing into somewhat similar line that I just showed you. All right, so bishop c6 was played in the game. And now bishop f4. And you can see that powerful bishop keeping black's rook from coming to b8. g5, harassing the bishop. And I know most of you would have played bishop g3. I would too. But bishop e5 was played. And I guess maybe what Arivindh was thinking is that, hey, if my bishop's going to get traded off by one of these knights, it might as well be the knight on d7. At least if knight takes e5, then knight takes e5. It brings the other knight to a good square on e5, attacking the bishop, as opposed to, say, bishop g3, and then the knight getting traded off. I'm sorry, the knight trading, then taking the bishop on the g3 square, compromising the black pawn structure, etc. But they're both decent moves. So bishop g3, for example, knight h5. Again, this is how play could look in a sample line. Just pretty equal game here. So a matter of preference. So bishop e5 was played. c4 closes the center. And now queen a3. When I was analyzing this game, I came up with the idea queen b4 because I felt that queen b4 gives the white queen more scope and more space in the enemy queen side. So for example, queen b4, right, first attacking the e pawn, and queen a3 does the same thing. This is what was played in the game, but notice the difference here. So queen a3, your queen is behind the a pawn. Queen b4, you'll end up in front of it. So queen b4, for example, let's say g4, hitting that knight again, knight h4, right, probing that f5 square. Say rook e8, right, got to defend the pawn eventually on e7. Now bishop g3, preserving that bishop. Bishop f8. Now, of course, e5 is a threat. And so now queen a5. And notice how the queen on a5 has more scope as it takes away the a6 square from the queen. And also it influences that short diagonal from a5 to e8. All right, so that's the idea that I had. So in the game, queen a3 was played. Rook e8, h3, and now bishop f8. Very, very similar play. And now you can see, after the queen moves to a2, notice the difference. Would you rather have that queen on a2 here or queen a5? Maybe some of you will want it on a2 and figure you can come to c2 later or something like that. But if you just compare those two scenarios, queen on a2 or queen on on a5, I think queen on a5 is probably a little better. But again, I think it's just a preference. No big deal. So after queen a3, rook e8, h3, bishop f8 was played. Another option was just to grab the bishop, of course. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bringing the knight to a great square. Bishop d7, f4, right? Queen c7, bishop f3, starting to line up on those fixed pawns, preparing e4 at some point too. So takes, e takes, bishop f8, queen a2. In this position, you see the queen come to that nice light square diagonal on c2. And this is just a sample line right here also. And white has a good position. And again, this kind of shows you why Arivindh put his bishop on e5. So in event of a trade, his knight will have a very good square to land on. So after h3 was played, bishop f8 was played by black instead of taking on e5. So queen a2, g4, h takes g4, knight takes g4, and now bishop g3. Now the bishop has to come back. Bishop f4 was also possible here, of course. So bishop g7 now. Rook f e1. Another idea is just rook b2 with the idea of doubling up on the b file. The idea, the most important thing in these type of positions is to have a plan. There's no real direct, threats, on the board. So planning is very important. You have to have some kind of idea, even if it's a bad plan. At least you have a plan. This is where a lot of players have trouble, is just trying to find moves when there's no real direct attacking motifs. Knight f8 was played, and now knight h2 with the idea of just getting rid of this knight, that's hovering in the enemy camp. And notice how he waited till knight f8 is played. If he does it now, say instead of rook f1, if he did it now, perhaps black would just swing his other knight to f6. So after knight f8, then he plays knight e2. A very strong move here is e4 that I want to mention, because in these type of positions, you'll see this type of pawn formation a lot. Sometimes in French defense, and various other openings. Also, the Queen's Gambit decline, Tarrasch variation, you'll see this sometimes where black will play a c4. And you see these pawns fixed like this. And a lot of times, e4 is a very powerful move at some point. And here it works fine too. So say after e4, d takes. And now you have a very strong move. Bishop takes c4, hitting the pawn on f7. And let's say he continues with the idea, right? He takes the knight, of course. Bishop takes f7, king h8, grab the rook. Queen takes, knight f3, and this is better for white, right? You have those two pawns, one of them fully passed, ready to just move up the board. You already set to play d5, c4, and those pawns off to the races. Another idea is bishop d1 with the idea of coming, just improving the station of that bishop, moving it to c2, and then of course playing e4. So again, having a plan is important. So I just showed you two other plans: bishop d1, e4. But here Arivindh says, you know what, let's just get rid of this knight. So knight takes h2, bishop takes h2, and now he plays e5. This is a critical moment right here. D takes e5, bishop takes e5, and now the bishops come off the board. All right. I think this is definitely better for white. After bishop takes e5, rook takes e5, knight f3. Basically, black has to, strategically anyway, I feel like black has to pretty much checkmate to win this game. His pawns are all just tossed everywhere. He has this horrible backward pawn on d5. The light square bishop is bad. White controls the b file. So I think he definitely would have to win by some attack at this point. Another idea, though, instead of capturing right away with the bishop takes e5, is to try to preserve his dark square bishop and play a move like knight d7. All right, to try to keep the bishop. Of course, white will then hold the pawn with f4, but what we're looking for in this case is not necessarily the material equality, but we're looking for some type of compensation for the pawn. So for instance, knight c5, and you see that the knight on c5 is looking at those light squares, namely d3 and e4. And this is one of the good points about hanging pawns, is that you can, in some scenarios, create some good outposts for your pieces. So we see in this sample line a5, queen d7, say bishop f3, rook a b8, rook e d1. Now bishop a4, because of course knight takes c4 is on the menu because of the position of the rook on d1 and the queen on d7. So bishop a4 attacking that rook, driving the rook away from d1. Bishop c6. And of course white is still better here, but I feel like black has more play in this position. After e5, d takes e5, bishop takes e5, bishops come off. I feel like black's position is worse than the variation. Notice the difference with the knights, right? In the variation, the knight was on c5, ready to hop in d3 or e4 at an opportune moment. And now it's still on f8, right? The rook is giving up a full tempo to white so he can develop his knight without wasting any time. Back to f3. Rook goes back to e6. And now Arivindh plays rook b d1. Another good, whoops, sorry about that. After rook b d1. Another good move for white, queen a3. It's the idea of going to c5. Again, just penetrating, getting into the position of the enemy, probing his position. Sample play could go queen d7, for example, knight d4, rook g6, bishop f3. Here, if bishop takes a4, very strong move, e4 here. Of course, if d takes e4, then bishop e4, hitting both rooks. So rook d8, for example, and now just knight takes c6, queen takes c6, queen e7. And good strong position for white. Okay, that backward pawn is going to be the death of him. And of course, knight d4 can be played also. So some other alternatives to rook bd1. Back to the game. After rook bd1, bishop b7. Again, please hit the thumbs up button. Just want to remind everybody, hit the thumbs up button and check the links below and consider supporting the channel. 27, bishop b7 was played. And now knight d4. Right, the most obvious move in the position as far as I'm concerned. But what I want to point out here is that the d4 square is so good for white. It can serve as like a depot or transfer station for the pieces. You could even put the rook there if you wanted to, with this idea that I have highlighted. This is another plan I came up with. Rook d4 with the idea of swinging the rook over to h4. Play the queen to d2. And then you play the rook on e1 to b1. So there's some sample lines with this, for example. Nice position for white. So, and this is definitely a sign that your position is getting better and better when you have multiple moves that are good. Another move is also just queen a3. So knight d4 was played, rook g6, bishop h5. Of course, queen c2, rook b1 are options there. But bishop h5 was played, rook g5 attacking the bishop. There's queen e2. This idea of f4. If you notice, the rook on g5 is in a precarious position, and sort of close to being trapped, and that's the idea behind queen e2 is to play this move f4. So after queen d7, f4, and the rook now only has two good squares, g7 or g3. So rook g7 is chosen, and now I've highlighted the pawn a4 that's under attack. So Arvind goes back to protect it, but what he also does is he takes over this diagonal a1 to h7, and he's threatened, of course, now to be able to put his knight there. So knight e6. Black would love to trade the knight on d4 off, but he just doesn't have time. And since the knight comes to e6, Arivindh moves his knight to f5, hitting the rook and the pawn on h6. So rook h7 is played, and of course this is a bad omen for things to come. That such a dynamic player like Arjun has to put his rook on h7 behind the pawn of all places. e4, very, very strong move. Again, this position has multiple good moves. Bishop f3, I'm not going to go into all the lines. Queen f2. And of course, e4, which was played in the game. And just exploiting the position of the queen on d7. Okay. So after e4, knight takes f4, obviously attacking the bishop on h5. Arjun, I don't know if he saw it or he just maybe underestimated the power of this move. E takes d5. Another good move again is just bishop g4, right? With these discovered motifs against the queen. Queen must move. E takes d5, knight d3, for example, and then you can just give up the exchange with a very good position for white. But e takes d5 is even stronger. And f6. Why f6? Well, if knight takes h5, then the rook comes up to e7. Very powerful move. Queen c8, for example. Queen f2. I'm not going to go through all the analysis, but white really starts rolling here. So this is why after e takes d5, this move f6 was played, so that the rook on h7 can now help defend the 7th rank. So bishop g4 was played. Again, problems with the lady on d7. So some more time lost. So queen d8. Bishop e2 is also just fine. Bishop g4 is very natural. Queen d8, rook d4, attacking the knight. So you can see how the how white is able to basically pull a reverse Uno card on black's attack, and now it's black who's counterattacking. First, black was attacking the bishop on h5, and now white has turned it against black, and now white is counterattacking. So knight d3, and just rook f1. And this is a good example. This is a good time to bring up the idea of complacency. Don't get complacent in your games. Now, I showed you a variation where you could give up the exchange, have a great position. This looks similar to that variation, but if you give up the exchange here, rook takes d3, c takes d3, you want to simplify, get the game over. You're figuring, hey, I get rid of that strong knight on d3. I have these two passers, exposed king, I should be good. And you might still win this game, but now black has a lot of fight in the position. Because after queen takes d3, queen d5, threatening mate. Queens come off the board, knight e7 check. And you have a very, drawerish type of situation. Black is definitely in a better situation than he would have been. So don't get complacent when you feel that the time for victory is drawing near. So rook f1 was played. Knight e5. Bishop h3 was played here. Knight g3, very strong move. And also knight e3. Two different plans. I like to show different plans to show that, it's not always the move that the grandmaster picked that was necessarily the best or the only correct move. Sometimes that's just his preference. Sometimes it's not the best move. Sometimes that's just his preference, style. If you see 2-3 ways to win, you're gonna pick what's works for you, what seems simplest for you. But I just want to show you out there, since we're analyzing the game, there's different alternatives, and a lot of these are moves that I thought of when I was watching the game and when I analyzed the game later. So I will be at this position and just think, what would I play? And I'm looking. I'm like, all right, I do like this idea, knight g3. Knight e3. The idea is, again, bring the queen f5, knight to h5, attacking the f6 pawn. Knight e3. Wants to bring the bishop to e6, queen to f5. So, good move was played, bishop h3. Nothing wrong with that, preserving the bishop. King tucks itself in the corner. And now d6 was played. Just fantastic move. Again, knight e3. The idea of bringing the bishop to f5 or e6. It's good also. But d6 was played, queen g8. And now we see Arjun trying to counterattack on the king side. And he does a good job, too, of generating threats in the position. So rook d f4 was played. Another fantastic move was just knight e7. That was actually the first move I thought of when I was looking at the game. Queen g5. You can actually go into the end game here, and you have a great game as white. Now it's a good time to trade. And basically, you say, well, why rook takes e7 there? Because there's really nothing that the black can do. If he tries to protect his pawn with rook f7, then just simply rook takes e5. So the knight is just, a terrible beast there in the position. And you can see this is practically lost for black. Another alternative is just knight h4. And let's say queen g5, for example, and bishop e6. Sorry about that. So let's go back to the game. Rook d f4 was played. Queen g5, and now knight e7. So you can see the f6 pawn is exposed. Rook g7. So now it's just mate at all cost. Rook takes f6, excuse me. Rook a g8. Knight takes g8. Rook takes g8. And now just rook f8. Very strong was just queen e2. And also queen f2. Very strong moves. And you'll see why those moves were better in the second. Again, there's multiple moves here that win for white, but you'll see why queen e2 and queen f2 are better. And it has to do with just eliminating counterplay. So rook f8 was played. Then knight d3 was played. If knight f3 check here, then just simply rook takes f3. You could take with either rook. Bishop takes f3, rook takes f3, and white is fine. So knight d3 was played instead. And then just simply rook takes g8. Again, queen e2. King takes g8 was played. d7. And then queen e2. I'm sorry, queen e3 check. And so I was saying how queen e2 was better or queen f2 was better. This is the reason. It just prevents that move later on. That's all. So if white played queen e2 here, there would be no queen e3 check or any type of counterplay in that way. Then he could go on with his plan of rook f8 and trading the rooks off, etc., etc. But the game continuation leaves a more memorable and aesthetically and is more aesthetically pleasing, if I might say. So knight d3, rook takes g8, king takes g8, d7. Again, queen e2 could have been played there. Also d7 and queen e3, and then queen f2, and Arjun resigned here. Why did he resign? Because there's no way to deal with the threat of the mate to the king, and also the queening on d7. All right, so for instance, if the knight was to capture the queen, well, white would just simply play d8 and queen himself. Same thing if queen takes queen. So there was nothing he could do to stop that. All right, the only trap in the position is here. If king h1, then queen takes h3, king g1, and queen d7, and that would probably bring white to tears if he allowed that. This combination is interesting though. This king h, after king h1, queen takes h3. It reminds me of the I know there were pawns on f2 and h2, but it reminds me of an old combination from the game Levitsky and Marshall, where allegedly Marshall played this combination. I forget what it was. I want to say queen g3 or something like that, and they said that spectators showered the board with coins, something like that. Those old stories are great because probably 90% of them aren't true or greatly exaggerated, but they're just funny to hear, like the old legendary stories, like they showered the board with coins, so that's how the game ended at queen f2, and that's what you saw in the video at the very beginning, the handshake from the two players. So fantastic game. I hope you guys enjoyed the analysis. Please like and subscribe. Definitely, again, even if you don't subscribe, just hit that like button, just to help.
Very exciting to watch. So.
Push the video, through the algorithm. All right, so I appreciate you guys, all that are listening. That do support the channel, and I'll keep bringing that content out for you. So please get in the comments below and let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys on the next video.